Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. For those that are new to my YouTube channel, subscribe immediately to see more content, and also leave a comment down below to suggest more amazing kinds of videos. Bring in part 10 of What If Spider-Man MCU entered Damnchi. Link down in description of the fan fiction This What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 19 The Spider God. Peter and Belle began making their way back up, their bags already full of monster loot. After a moment, Belle glanced at the packed sacks and asked, confusion clear in his voice, why didn't you conjure bags with your magic today? We could have carried a lot more. Peter shook his head, better not, I want to head back before Hestia leaves for the banquet of the gods. We need to warn her about the Anansi Familia's interest in us. Belle nodded immediately, his expression turning serious. Yeah, that's more important. By the time they reached the 8th floor, they had settled into an easy rhythm. Monsters that wandered into their path barely slowed them down. Peter and Belle shattered their crystal cores with efficient strikes as they moved at a comfortable pace. There was no rush. Thanks to Jane, Peter could keep precise track of time even deep underground, a luxury most adventurers could only dream of. Peter glanced sideways at Belle. Belle, I told you this yesterday too, right after you almost blurted out Jane's existence to Ice Wallenstein. You really need to develop some resistance to pretty faces. Belle stiffened. I didn't almost blurt it out. You absolutely did, Peter continued flatly. And today was no better. Those girls were obviously spying on us, yet you were already gearing up to rescue them, even though we were the ones who caught them. Belle laughed awkwardly and scratched the back of his head. Sorry, Peter, that werewolf girl was intense. And my grandpa always told me to help damsels in distress. Peter stopped walking and turned toward him, glaring, though Belle couldn't see it through the mask. They were not damsels in distress. They were high-level adventurers from a rival familia, and they were spying on us. He paused, then added, and yes, I agree about the werewolf girl. Peter grimaced. She made me nervous too. But, Peter continued firmly, you have to learn to work through that discomfort. Otherwise, all a rival familia has to do is send a pretty girl to flirt with you, and you'll spill our secrets in under 5 minutes. Belle went pale. I wouldn't. Peter cut him off. You would. Belle's shoulders slumped, guilt-ridden all over his face as he continued walking beside him in silence. The clink of their gear echoed softly through the corridor. After a moment, Peter sighed inwardly. Maybe I was too hard on him. Without slowing his pace, Peter spoke again, his tone softer. Believe it or not, I used to be awkward around girls too. Really awkward, especially before I started dating. Belle looked up at him in surprise. Really? Peter gave a small, self-deprecating chuckle. Yeah, I overthought everything. One smile and my brain would just shut down. Took me a long time to get over that. Belle seemed to relax a little. I thought, I don't know. You always seem so confident. That's learned, Peter replied. Not natural. Belle relaxed a little, then scratched the back of his head. Honestly, a lot of this is probably my grandpa's fault. Peter glanced at him, his voice gentler. He raised you after your parents died, right? Yeah, Belle said with a sheepish laugh. I don't even remember my parents. Grandpa was all I ever knew. He sighed. He filled my head with all these weird ideas, heroes rescuing maidens, love at first sight, destiny, fate. He waved his hands vaguely. Every time I see a girl in trouble, all those stories come rushing back, and my thoughts turn to complete mush. Then his voice quieted. But, he meant well. Those stories were all he had to give me. A faint, nostalgic smile tugged at his lips. I loved listening to them. They made the world feel bigger. Peter nodded slowly. Sounds like he was trying to give you hope. Yeah, Belle said quietly. Even if it kind of messed me up. Peter snorted. Trust me, most people are messed up by someone they love. Belle laughed, surprised by how true that sounded. After a few moments, Belle spoke again, more hesitantly. You know, I always envied kids who had siblings. Peter slowed, then reached up and removed his mask. Same. Belle stopped too, blinking in surprise. Really? Yeah, Peter said. I don't remember my parents either. My uncle and aunt took me in after they died. His voice remained steady, but there was something distant in his eyes. My uncle passed away when I was still young. After that, my aunt worked herself to the bone to raise me. He let out a quiet breath. She did everything she could. But I still watched other kids, brothers and sisters arguing, playing, pulling pranks on each other. A faint smile flickered. Even fighting looked nice. Belle nodded slowly. I used to feel the same. Grandpa was my whole world, but, he swallowed. I still felt alone sometimes. Watching other kids grow up together, knowing they always had someone. Peter looked at him steadily. You're not anymore. Belle frowned slightly. Huh, we're both children of Hestia now, Peter said. Same familia, same home. His voice was calm, unshakable. That makes us brothers. Maybe not by blood, but it still matters. Belle stared at him for a heartbeat, then his eyes shimmered. Suddenly, he stepped forward and wrapped Peter in a tight, earnest hug. Peter froze. An old memory flashed through his mind, him awkwardly leaning toward Mr. Stark in a car to hug him, only for Stark to mutter, "This is not a hug. I'm just getting the door." The embarrassment of being left hanging still stung. Not this time. Peter hesitated for barely a second before returning the hug, a little awkward, a little stiff, but real. He held it just long enough for Belle to feel it mattered. When they pulled apart, Peter reached up and affectionately ruffled Belle's rabbit-like white hair. "Hey," Belle muttered, already turning away before things got too heavy. He slipped his mask back on, ostensibly to bring Jane's HUD interface back online, and absolutely not because his eyes were starting to mist over. They started walking again, side by side. The dungeon hadn't changed, but somehow, it felt less heavy than before. When they reached the guild, Belle peeled off toward Aina, while Peter queued up at the same cat-person teller's counter, the very one who had argued with him last time. The teller's ears flicked in clear recognition, and he grimaced faintly on spotting Peter, but he wisely finished serving the customer ahead of him without comment. Peter had just settled into idle observation when he suddenly winced. "You went down to the 10th floor." Aina's voice echoed across the guild hall, loud enough to turn a few heads. Peter sighed inwardly. So much for subtlety. The adventurer at the counter completed his valuation and requested that part of his earnings be deposited directly into his familia's account, taking the rest in coins. Peter watched with mild interest, noting, once again, that this world possessed a surprisingly functional banking system. Still, he didn't dwell on it for long. A small commotion broke out at the counter beside the one Peter was queued at. An adventurer was loudly arguing with the clerk, insisting he was being cheated, that his loot was worth more than the guild claimed. He looked filthy. Stained clothes, uncut nails, unkempt hair, eyes a little too restless. To Peter, the signs were unmistakable. A junkie. Whispers rippled through the line. Soma familia shithead. They always make a scene. Maybe he's right, someone muttered. I was here yesterday when that spider guy did his exchange. Looked fishy. The Soma adventurer's gaze snapped to Peter. He jabbed a finger in his direction. Ask him, the spider guy, he knows how this place cheats people. Peter sighed inwardly as he stepped up to the counter. Without a word, he loosened his bag and turned it upside down over the exchange box. Monster loot spilled out, orc cores thudding heavily, bad bat cores clinking sharply, imp cores scattering like glass marbles. The clerk leaned over, counting aloud as he worked, fingers moving with practiced speed. 12 orc cores, 2 orc hides, 15 bad bat cores. He paused briefly, then continued. 34 imp cores. He scribbled quickly, did a few mental calculations, then announced. Total comes to 90,900 valis. Peter waited until the clerk finished counting and writing before speaking. Excuse me, he said calmly. The imp cores are 32. Not 34. The clerk blinked and looked up, clearly surprised. You're sure? Yes, Peter replied evenly. I counted before sealing the bag. There was a brief silence as the clerk went back, recounting the smaller cores one by one. His ears flicked in irritation, at himself, not Peter. You're right, he admitted. 32. He scratched out the number and recalculated. Revised total. 90,300 valis. The Soma adventurer didn't leave. He hovered a moment longer, eyes narrowed, watching Peter and the clerk like he was waiting for a slip, clearly hoping for proof that the guild was cheating. When none came, he clicked his tongue. TCH, traitor, he muttered. So now you're all buddy-buddy with the guild, huh? Peter didn't even look at him. Honest people don't ask for more, he said evenly. They ask for what's right. A few nearby adventurers murmured in agreement, one giving a short nod. The Soma adventurer scowled, spat a curse under his breath, and stomped away. The teller exhaled once the man was gone. They're always like that, he said quietly. Soma familia, always complaining, always accusing. He straightened and gave Peter a polite nod. Name's Tom Fellis. Peter paused, his gaze drifting to the man's feline ears, the striped tail swaying lazily behind him, and the permanently unimpressed look etched across his face. Tom, he echoed under his breath, perfectly flat. For half a heartbeat, his mind supplied the image of a cartoon cat chasing a mouse with far more confidence than competence. Peter Parker, he replied. Tom finished the paperwork. How would you like the payout? 3 equal shares, Peter said. As Peter stepped away from the counter, pouches in hand, he felt more eyes on him than before. He'd simply been honest, and somehow, that stood out more than anything else. Peter wandered over to Aina's counter, only to be met with a glare sharp enough to qualify as a weapon. He sighed and took off his mask, bracing himself. Aina leaned forward and hissed, Mr. Parker. How are you this irresponsible? Yesterday you were on the 7th floor, and today you casually strolled down to the 10th. Do you have any idea how long it takes most adventurers to get that far? Peter nodded thoughtfully. More than a year, usually. That was not a trivia question. Right, sorry. He cleared his throat. Miss Aina, I'm not most adventurers. I studied everything I could about the middle floors in the library beforehand. You can trust me, Belle is safe with me. Belle nodded vigorously, as if his life depended on it. And tomorrow, Peter continued calmly, I'll be going even deeper, to the Under Resort, with Tiona. I can handle it, I'll learn more about the dungeon before taking Belle down any further. He turned to Belle. Promise me you won't go below the 6th floor tomorrow. Belle straightened. I promise. Aina pinched the bridge of her nose. Belle isn't even supposed to go past the 4th floor yet. She shot Belle a glare. That's it, I'm scheduling a full lecture for you, starting from the upper floors and going all the way to the deep levels. You're meeting me tomorrow. She paused. Oh no, monsterphilia duty. Her shoulders slumped. I'll lecture you after monsterphilia. Belle, who had been looking like he'd just sucked on a lemon, visibly relaxed. While Aina was still recovering, Peter casually added, oh, and I'd like to be registered as the Familia captain. Aina froze. Then it was her turn to look like she'd bitten into a lemon. Fine, she said tightly, sliding a form across the counter. But this needs to be countersigned by your goddess. And she should consider it very carefully. This is an important decision. Peter took the form, resisting the urge to smirk. She really doesn't trust me, he mused. Honestly, he couldn't even blame her. After a brief pause, Peter asked, Miss Aina, what do you know about the Anansi Familia? Aina blinked, then frowned. That's a very specific question. Why do you ask? Peter kept his answer deliberately brief. He mentioned the 2 women they had encountered in the dungeon, only that they had crossed paths and that their interest hadn't felt accidental. He omitted the part where he had webbed them up. Aina's expression changed immediately. This is serious, she said quietly. She glanced around, then motioned for both of them to follow her. Come with me. Aina guided them into a small, enclosed booth reserved for sensitive consultations, thick curtains drawn, the noise of the guild fading to a dull murmur. She excused herself and returned moments later carrying a heavy file stamped with the guild seal. As she opened it, Belle swallowed. This wasn't a casual warning. The Anansi Familia is officially listed as a B-class Familia, Aina began, her tone careful. They've been active for less than 10 years, which already makes them unusual. She turned the file so they could see. Their captain is level 5. Beneath him are 3 level 4s, and several level 3s. Belle stiffened. That's really strong. It is, Aina agreed. Then she frowned, eyes narrowing at the page. That's odd. Peter tilted his head. What is? She flipped back a few pages, scanning quickly. With this many high-class adventurers, they should qualify as A-class. Easily. She paused, then exhaled softly. Ah, I see. Belle leaned forward. See what? They only have 20 adventurers total, Aina said. Familia rank takes size into account. Their small numbers are dragging their classification down. Peter frowned. Is that unusual? Yes, Aina said without hesitation. Most familias recruit aggressively, especially ones with momentum like this. But Anansi Familia, she hesitated, choosing her words. They barely recruit at all. She stared at the file for a moment longer. They keep a very low profile, she murmured. Which is unsettling, considering their growth rate. Then, as if remembering something, she looked up. I only know this much because, Shortly after I joined the guild, they fought a war game against Horus Familia. Bell blinked. Horus Familia, but they were much stronger, right? On paper, Aina said. Yes, larger numbers, higher overall levels. Most people bet on Horus. But most gods didn't. Peter's eyes sharpened. They bet on Anansi. Aina nodded, almost unanimously, as if the outcome was already decided. A quiet settled over the booth. She paused, then slid another page forward. This is their symbol. Printed clearly on the parchment was the image of a spider seated at the center of an intricate web, elegant, deliberate, and unsettling. Peter's gaze lingered on it for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. The resemblance to his own suit's motif was uncomfortable, even if the integrated armor's golden strands presently concealed it. Aina noticed his reaction, misunderstanding it. If you've seen that symbol before, she said, then you were almost certainly being observed. She closed the file and folded her hands atop it. You're drawing far too much attention, she said to Peter quietly. I've already heard several rumors about you, one that a newly registered adventurer defeated a level 5, and another that Freya Familia's vice captain was publicly humiliated. Her gaze hardened with concern. For a small, newly formed familia like Hestia's, that kind of notice is dangerous. She met Peter's eyes. In times like these, it's wiser to move quietly. Keep your head low. Don't fly your banner too high. Let others pass you by without taking a second look. Bell nodded quickly. Why yeah, we'll be careful. Right, Peter. Peter gave a small, polite smile. Of course. Inside, however, he couldn't help but think, that ship has already sailed. Still, he inclined his head respectfully. Thank you for the warning, Miss Aina. We'll keep it in mind. Aina studied him for a long moment, clearly unconvinced, but her concern was unmistakable. Please do, she said softly. Both of you. I'd hate to see promising adventurers get caught in a god's web. When they returned to their home, the broken church, Hestia was already waiting for them. And for a moment, both Peter and Bell just stopped. Hestia had changed into her new dress and jewelry, and the transformation was striking. The simple, energetic goddess they knew was now dressed to dazzle. The fabric shimmered softly in the light, hugging her figure, and delicate jewelry caught and reflected every movement. Glass high-heeled sandals added a few precious inches to her height, making her look just a little more regal. Bell's jaw dropped, completely. Hestia noticed immediately. Well, she said, spinning once with a grin. Thanks to my wonderful children, I can finally make a great impression on the other gods. Peter gave a small smile. You look great, goddess. Bell nodded a little too fast. Why yeah, you look amazing. Hestia beamed, clearly enjoying the reaction. Then Peter's expression grew more serious. We need to warn you. The Anansi Familia took an interest in us today. He briefed her quickly about the Anansi Familia. Her expression dimmed for a moment. Yes, she said quietly. I've heard of Anansi in Tenkai. Minor god, yes, but his reputation isn't. She frowned slightly. They say he's never truly lost to anyone. For a moment, the room felt heavier. Then Hestia clapped her hands sharply and forced a bright smile. But there's nothing we can do about that tonight, she declared. Worrying won't help, so I'm going to enjoy the banquet. Peter reached into his pouch and held out the familia's share of the loot. Here, for the familia. Hestia shook her head immediately. Nope. What? Bell asked. You two earned it, Hestia said firmly. Go have a proper feast. On familia expense, she pointed at them. That's an order. It's the least I can do before I go face a room full of smug, overdressed gods. Bell's eyes sparkled. Really? Peter smiled faintly. Thank you, goddess. They hailed a taxi and boarded the horse-drawn carriage bound for the Ganesha Manor. As the massive structure came into view, Peter leaned forward, staring. The manor was not just a building. It was a gigantic elephant-headed statue. They got down from the carriage to see Hestia off. Peter blinked. Once. Twice. The entrance was located, unmistakably, at the statue's crotch. Is the entrance where I think it is? He asked slowly. Bell squinted. I think, yeah. Hestia laughed, hugged them both tightly, then turned and hurried off toward the entrance, clearly eager not to be late. As they stood there, staring at the enormous elephant statue, two Ganesha guards in elephant masks shifted awkwardly beside them. Bell cleared his throat. Impressive architecture. One of the guards coughed. We try not to think about the entrance placement. Peter nodded solemnly. Wise. They turned and walked away, both silently agreeing on one thing: some gods had very questionable taste in real estate design. The moment Hestia stepped into the hall, the air subtly changed. Laughter dipped, then resumed, just a fraction too loud, too forced. Hestia felt it immediately. Eyes turning, conversation stalling mid-sentence, goblets pausing halfway to lips. She straightened without thinking. The new dress shimmered under the lights, the jewelry catching just enough glow to demand attention without begging for it. Good, she thought, I look divine, as I should. Gods and goddesses began pointing, discreetly, of course. A tilt of the chin, a lazy flick of a finger hidden behind a sleeve. Whispers followed, rippling through the hall like soft static. Isn't that, Hestia, right, she's really wearing that. Wasn't she poor? The word spider floated more than once. Hestia's smile didn't falter, but her ears caught everything. Level 1 adventurer defeated level 5. Bold of her to show up tonight. Or reckless, maybe both. She lifted her chin a little higher and walked forward, heels clicking confidently against the polished floor. If they were going to stare, she might as well give them a proper view. Let them whisper, she thought. Let them point. She accepted a glass from a passing waiter, took a graceful sip, and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. I didn't come here to hide, she reminded herself. I came to shine. Hestia, is that you? The voice was warm, rich, and unmistakably familiar. Hestia turned, and her face lit up instantly. Standing before her was Demeter, radiant as ever. The goddess's long, wavy hair flowed like liquid honey down her back, catching the light with every subtle movement. Her orange eyes were calm and fertile, filled with quiet strength. She wore white gloves and a softly colored dress edged in darker tones, a delicate wheat symbol embroidered near her collar, simple and elegant. Hestia's smile was genuine, unguarded. Demeter, long time no see, she said warmly. How have you been? Well enough, Demeter replied, lips curving gently. Her gaze lingered on Hestia for a second longer than polite society required, appraising, curious. Then, casually, as if discussing the weather, she added. Though I hear your spider child has been creating quite a few ripples in Orario. Hestia felt it immediately. Nearby gods froze mid-sip. Laughter died halfway through exhalations. Conversations continued. Technically, but every ear leaned closer, every posture angled just enough to listen without appearing to do so. Demeter's tone remained light. I'd love to hear more about him. Hestia smiled, serene, practiced, divine. I would love to discuss him, she said smoothly. But perhaps not here. Why don't we meet later? Demeter's eyes brightened. Perfect. Come to my manor tomorrow. She leaned in just slightly, lowering her voice with conspiratorial delight. I had a bath installed recently. Truly divine. Hestia laughed softly, tempting as always. As Demeter turned to greet another goddess, Hestia's eyes drifted, just for a heartbeat, toward the buffet. Golden platters, roasted meats, towers of sweets, rivers of wine. Her tongue nearly watered, her feet twitched. Then, Peter. She could picture him perfectly. Arms crossed, that calm, disappointed look. You represent the prosperity and image of the familia, goddess. A little dignity, please. Hestia straightened again. I can do this, she told herself firmly. I can be dignified. She resisted the urge to sprint for the food, kept her hands politely folded, and turned back to Demeter, continuing the small talk with grace, laughing at the right moments, nodding thoughtfully, every bit the composed goddess. Inside, however, she was already planning which dish she would demolish first the moment no one important was looking. Roasted boar, or maybe the honey-glazed fruit first. Just then, another familiar presence joined them. Hestia, you look well. Hestia turned, her face lighting up genuinely. Standing beside Demeter was Hephaestus, tall and composed, her single visible eye sharp as ever beneath her eye patch. Her dark attire was simple but refined, no excess, no ornamentation, just quiet authority. Hephi, Hestia greeted warmly, it's really good to see you. Hephaestus gave a small nod. I'm glad you're doing well. Hestia hesitated for half a second, then leaned in slightly. Actually, there's something I wanted to talk to you about. Could we meet at your place after the party? Hephaestus's eye narrowed with practiced suspicion. You're not going to ask me for something again, are you? What? Hestia scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. PFF'd. No, what do you take me for? Hephaestus snorted, a goddess who freeloaded off my generosity for months and never once felt guilty about it. Hestia puffed out her cheeks. That was a temporary arrangement. Demeter smiled faintly into her cup, clearly enjoying the exchange. Before Hestia could mount a proper defense, a subtle hush rippled through the nearby gods. Conversations faltered, eyes shifted. A familiar, oppressive beauty entered their periphery. Freya approached, clad in a revealing gown that seemed designed less to clothe her and more to command attention. Heads turned openly now, the waiters, gods, even the goddesses, blatantly staring, some not even pretending subtlety. Freya smiled, serene and devastating. Demeter, Hephaestus, she greeted pleasantly. It's been a while. Demeter inclined her head politely. Hephaestus acknowledged her with a neutral nod. Hestia, however, simply narrowed her eyes. Oh, it's you. Freya's smile widened just a fraction. That's why I like you, Hestia. Always so direct. Unimpressed, Hestia crossed her arms. You know your vice-captain was harassing my child, right? Freya laughed softly, as if amused by a fond memory. I have many children. If I had to keep track of all their drunken encounters in taverns, I'm afraid I'd never have time for anything else. She gestured vaguely around them. As it is, there are already so many vying for my attention. She didn't need to look, everyone present already was. Several gods were openly gawking. Even a few goddesses hadn't bothered to hide their interest. Hestia clicked her tongue. TCH, figures. Freya's gaze lingered on her, curious and sharp beneath the smile. Still, it seems your familia has been lively lately. Hestia felt it again, that weight of attention, the subtle tightening of the air. Gods nearby pretended to sip drinks, to admire decorations, all while listening shamelessly. She forced a bright, polite smile. Oh, I wouldn't know, Hestia replied sweetly. My children are very well behaved. Freya's eyes glinted. She reached out just as a flustered waiter drifted a little too close, clearly eager to please. Freya accepted a glass of wine with effortless grace, her fingers brushing the stem as if by accident. The waiter nearly tripped over himself retreating. Turning back to Hestia, Freya smiled, soft, inviting, and far too sharp to be harmless. Then why don't you tell me more, she asked coyly, lifting the glass to her lips, about these wonderful children of yours. A few minutes earlier, Loki stood at the edge of the upper gallery, one boot hooked casually against the carved balustrade as she looked down over the glittering ballroom below. Chandeliers burned like captive stars, music drifted upward in lazy waves, and gods clustered in bright knots of gossip and wine. She was already in a foul mood. She had come here to escape her familia, her precious angels, who for the past day had been far too united for her liking. Whispers of romance, fate, and Prince Charming had followed her through the manor halls like a curse. Apparently, watching one of their own get defeated by a level 1 had sparked dangerous ideas. Hopeful ideas, the worst kind. And now the other gods had picked up the scent. So, Loki, is it true? I heard your familia, a level 1, really? She didn't even bother turning anymore. As if on cue, Apollo drifted up beside her, smile sharp and calculating, golden curls catching the light. Loki, he began smoothly, I heard. Buzz off, Apollo. Flat, final. Apollo blinked, recalculated, then retreated with impressive speed, wisely sensing divine violence in the air. Loki exhaled slowly, should have stayed home, locked the doors, set traps. Then the air changed. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. No announcement, no flare of divinity. Just a subtle tightening, like invisible threads being drawn together. Conversations nearby softened without anyone quite knowing why. A voice spoke behind her, warm and amused. Is that any way to greet a fellow god? Loki turned. Anansi stood there as if he had always belonged in that exact spot. He wore a sharp, pin-striped suit that looked both expensive and lived in, the kind a man could spill stories and blood on without wrinkling. A fedora sat at a lazy angle atop his head, shadowing eyes that missed nothing. His skin was dark and rich, his smile wide and knowing, too friendly to be trusted, too genuine to dismiss. Perched on his shoulder was a large spider, its body shimmering with subtle hues, deep blues, burnished golds, hints of crimson and green, like oil on water. Its many eyes glinted with intelligence as it shifted its legs, utterly unbothered by the divine finery around it. Loki stared for half a heartbeat, then grinned. Well, I'll be damned, she said. If it isn't trouble in a hat. Anansi tipped his fedora. I prefer story in motion. Loki reached out instinctively. Can I? The spider skittered back an inch and clicked its mandibles, sharp and unmistakably offended. She froze. Wow, okay, rude. Anansi laughed, low and rich. Spiders don't like being petted. Loki shot him a sideways look. You pet them all the time. Because, he said easily, spiders like me. She snorted despite herself. When gods of the same domain crossed paths, things usually went poorly. Love goddesses circled each other like blades, Freya, Ishtar, Aphrodite, all smiles and poison. Smith gods bristled, Hephaestus and Goibniu measuring skill with narrowed eyes. War gods, Ares, Caturix, Nate barely made it 5 minutes without posturing. But tricksters laughed and joked. Loki leaned against the railing beside Anansi, her irritation easing despite herself. What brings you slumming it up here? Anansi followed her gaze down to the ballroom. Curiosity, he said, and a very interesting story. She groaned. Not one of your stories. He ignored her completely. Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, Anansi began, voice smooth as silk, there was a trickster goddess in Damnchi. Clever, loud, forever standing just a step behind her heroic warrior brother. Even after he sacrificed himself, even after the songs ended, his shadow lingered. Loki rolled her eyes. You're pushing it. When she descended to Damnchi, he continued calmly, she finally made a name for herself. Built something fierce, something proud. She stepped out of that shadow at last, only to be reminded of it by a wayward little adventurer. That's where you stop, Loki warned. And yet, Anansi smiled, that's where it gets good. She cut in sharply, voice dry with sarcasm. So she saw a chance to have this annoying nobody crushed. A lesson, really, but the plan backfired. The nobody defeated one of her top children, humiliated her familia, and stole her child's heart. She gestured vaguely with her drink. Now her precious angels are rebelling, whining about romance and destiny, and the joke's on the goddess instead. Ha, ha, very funny. Anansi studied her for a long moment. The spider on his shoulder settled, still as a thought. I didn't realize it was that bad, he said at last, genuinely. Loki's shoulders slumped a fraction. I came here to get away from it, she muttered. But it's worse here. Every god in the room wants to poke at my familia's humiliation like it's tonight's entertainment. Anansi nodded slowly, smile returning, soft, dangerous. Ah, he said, stories do that. Once they start, they spread. Loki glanced at him sideways. You enjoying this? His grin widened, eyes gleaming beneath the brim of his hat. Oh, Anansi said pleasantly. Immensely. She saw it then and sighed, long and weary. And my day just got even worse. Anansi followed her gaze. Below, at the grand entrance of the hall, Hestia had just arrived. The goddess of the hearth was radiant, there was no other word for it. Her dress shimmered like starlight caught in silk, modest yet elegant, moving with a quiet confidence that drew eyes without demanding them. Laughter rippled outward as she passed, gods turning, whispers blooming in her wake. Even seasoned deities paused to look twice. Loki's jaw tightened. This isn't fair, she muttered. She was supposed to be poor. Living on the street, selling snacks and eating scraps. Anansi hummed thoughtfully, eyes never leaving the scene. Funny how stories change. Loki crossed her arms. How is she doing so well? Anansi's lips curved, amused. Probably the same adventurer who's capable of defeating a level 5. That landed harder than she expected. Loki exhaled, shoulders slumping. I should leave. If she sees me, she'll just gloat. I can already hear it. She turned on her heel before Anansi could reply and started down the stairs, moving quickly, head lowered, slipping between gods and attendants with practiced ease. For a moment, it looked like she might actually get away unnoticed. Anansi watched her go, eyes glinting. Loki was his friend. And friends, true friends, were meant to be cherished. And occasionally pranked. His inner trickster stirred. With perfect timing, Anansi flicked his wrist. The empty glass left his hand in a lazy arc, struck the edge of a waiter's tray, and sent crystal and wine cascading in every direction. Glass shattered, liquid splashed, a sharp cry rang out as attendants scrambled. Even as the chaos bloomed, Anansi was already moving, drifting away from the balcony with the crowd, unhurried, unnoticed. The ballroom froze, all eyes turned toward the sudden mess. And then, inevitably, followed the line of chaos to the goddess trying very hard to pretend she wasn't hurrying away. Loki stopped mid-step, slowly, reluctantly, she felt it. A gaze. She looked up. Hestia was staring right at her. Not alone, either. Hephaestus stood at her side, one red eye already narrowing with interest. Demeter watched with polite concern, hands folded. And Freya, of course Freya, looked positively entertained, her lips curved in a knowing smile as if she'd just been handed front row seats to a play she adored. Hestia's eyes lit up, and then, disaster. She made a beeline straight for Loki, weaving through gods and spilled wine without missing a step. "Loki," Hestia called brightly, hands clasped behind her back. "Leaving without saying hello." Loki sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "How are you, midget? I almost didn't see you down there." Hestia smiled sweetly, dangerously so. "Oh, funny," she said, tilting her head. "I was just thinking how that suit highlights your masculine figure perfectly." A nearby god choked on his drink. Loki's eye twitched. "Watch it." Hestia pressed on, utterly unbothered. "Honestly, it explains so much. No wonder my child thought you were Thor's brother." Silence. "Then, that's it," Loki snapped. In one swift motion she lunged forward and pinched Hestia's cheeks, hard. "Take that back." "Hey," Hestia yelped, swatting at her hands. "Unhand me, you overgrown." The next second, Hestia jumped Loki. Literally, she wrapped her arms around Loki's shoulders and yanked, using momentum and pure spite to drag them both off balance. They went down in a tangle of limbs and fabric, hitting the polished floor with a thud that echoed through the ballroom. Gasps erupted. Hephaestus and Demeter rushed in, trying to separate the two goddesses, only to earn an elbow to the ribs and a sharp kick for their efforts. "Watch the dress," Hephaestus barked. "Hestia, Loki, please," Demeter pleaded, clearly reconsidering every life choice that had led her here. Freya, meanwhile, continued forward at a serene, unhurried pace, as if the chaos were nothing more than ambient noise. As she moved, whispers brushed against her ears, soft, eager, merciless. This was bound to happen. Hestia's rookie beat Loki's level 5 crusher. "I bet on Hestia, I bet on Loki, I hope Demeter's dress rips." And then, booming and utterly unhelpful, "I am Ganesha." The elephant-masked host struck a heroic pose nearby, flexing proudly, and doing absolutely nothing to stop the fighting goddesses. Freya's gaze drifted at last from the scuffle. Down the stairs, gods were gathering, drawn to the spectacle like moths to flame. Among them, moving with easy confidence, was Anansi, descending as though he had merely decided the view was better from below. Her lips curved, her best smile. "Anansi," Freya said smoothly, voice carrying just enough to reach him. "It's been a long time." She let a sliver of her aura flare, just enough to make most gods slack-jawed, hearts racing, reason dissolving into devotion. Anansi turned toward her, eyebrow lifting with interest. And then, eek, Freya shrieked as something warm, many-legged, and unmistakably alive landed squarely on her face. The multicolored spider, brilliant blues, reds, and golds shimmering under the light, clung to her with unsettling confidence. Freya flailed, utterly abandoning dignity as she staggered backward, clawing at the air. The spider leapt off at the last second, landing perfectly back on Anansi's shoulder. The hall froze. Freya's face darkened. "That monster attacked me. Get rid of it immediately." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the crowd. Several nearby gods reacted on instinct, stepping forward, hands half raised as they moved to place themselves between Freya and the perceived threat. Then reality caught up. They saw who Freya was glaring at. The gods hesitated. One stopped mid-step, another slowly lowered his hand. A third turned his gaze away as if suddenly fascinated by the ceiling. In the span of a heartbeat, courage turned into caution, and intervention into quiet observation from a very safe distance. Anansi, for his part, seemed utterly unconcerned. He reached up and calmly petted the multicolored spider perched on his shoulder. "Easy now, Kwaku," he murmured, tone fond, almost indulgent. Then he looked back to Freya, smiling pleasantly. "Please forgive her, she's very protective of me. She must have thought you were trying to cause harm." He gave a light shrug. "Spiders don't really understand God's auras, you see. They just respond when they perceive danger." His smile never faded as he gestured vaguely toward the seating above. "Why don't we sit and talk?" he said mildly, already turning away, like the civilized gods we are. Without waiting for her answer, Anansi walked up the stairs and claimed a secluded table, crossing one leg over the other as though the matter had already been stood there for a heartbeat, stunned. Her charm, ignored. Her aura, dismissed. Behind her, Demeter and Hephaestus finally managed to pry Loki and Hestia apart, both goddesses still snarling and fixing each other with venomous glares. Freya exhaled slowly, smoothing her dress back into place. Then, still wearing grace-like armor, Freya followed Anansi. She seated herself opposite him, back straight, chin lifted, eyes blazing with cold fury. The secluded table felt suddenly too small for the pressure gathering around it. A waiter hurried over, hands trembling, set down 2 glasses of wine, and fled without waiting for acknowledgement. "I will say this once more," she said coolly. "Get rid of that filthy insect. Any being that dares attack a god should be put down. I have crushed entire familias in war games for far less." Anansi merely smiled, unbothered, one long finger idly stroking the multicolored spider perched on his shoulder. "First," he said mildly, "spiders are not insects. They are arachnids." Freya's glare sharpened, but more importantly, he continued smoothly, "Give me a chance to change your mind about Kwaku." He leaned back slightly, eyes gleaming with mischief and something far older. "Let me tell you a story." Freya blinked despite herself. "A story. Once upon a time," Anansi began, voice rich and unhurried, "there lived a beautiful goddess in Tenkai. She was trapped in an unhappy, loveless marriage, to a one-eyed control freak of a god." Freya's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. This goddess longed for her true destined love. But her husband, Anansi chuckled softly, did not appreciate her independence. He threatened her with his legendary spear, a weapon said to kill even the immortal. Anansi's eyes never left Freya's. So the goddess waited, and when the moment came, she descended to Genkai. Free at last, she resumed her search. He lifted his glass, swirling the wine. Alas, she was cursed, and blessed, with divine charm. All who looked upon her lost themselves in love. But such hollow devotion bored her. She wanted something real, something untainted. Freya's breath slowed, and so, Anansi continued, she took another form. When her familia's captain retired and opened a tavern, she disguised herself as a mortal, and worked there as a humble waitress. The wineglass left Freya's hand in a flash of divine fury. Red wine exploded through the air, and somehow, none of it touched him. Anansi shifted just enough for the liquid to pass harmlessly by, splashing across the floor and table behind him, while his hand closed around the empty glass mid-flight. Smooth, exact, effortless. He set the glass back down between them, dry fingers, unwrinkled suit, pleasant smile intact. "If you ever reveal that secret," Freya hissed, her aura flaring sharp and dangerous, "I will crush you and your familia." Anansi leaned back, folding his hands, posture easy, regal without effort. For a fleeting moment, he looked less like a guest at a party and more like a god remembered from older, darker stories. "I avoid conflict whenever possible," he said gently. Then his eyes hardened, ancient and amused all at once. "But when it finds me, I always win." For a heartbeat, Freya felt it. Not charm, not threat. Certainty. A memory surfaced unbidden. Odin's spear leveled at her chest, inevitability etched into his single eye. She forced herself to breathe. "Fine," Freya said at last. "Keep your spider." Her gaze hardened. "But know this, Peter is mine." Anansi smiled wider. "Don't you mean Peter and Belle?" Freya's eyes snapped to him. "How do you know about both of them?" As far as she knew, only she could see souls. "You have your magic mirror," Anansi replied lightly. "I have my own methods." Freya's eyes widened somewhat. He leaned forward. "How about a pact?" "A pact," Freya echoed. "I won't interfere with your pursuit of Belle," Anansi said. "He's yours to claim." Freya's eyes softened by a fraction, enough to signal agreement. "But Peter," Anansi continued, eyes glinting, "we both try. Fair and square, whoever wins, keeps him." Silence stretched between them. Freya considered. Losing Peter was a risk, but the goddess of war within her thrilled at the challenge. At last, she inclined her head, her expression carved from ice. "Very well." They shook hands. Anansi lifted her hand and brushed a brief, courtly kiss against her knuckles before leaving. Freya remained seated, her face still and unreadable long after he had gone. Then, slowly, a smile curved her lips. Not the smile of love. Not the smile of desire. But the smile of a goddess of war who had finally found a worthy challenge. Chapter 20. Hidden Stats and Feelings. The hostess of fertility was unusually quiet. The door opened, the familiar warmth and smell of food greeting Peter and Belle, but not the usual noise. No laughter spilling over tables. No rowdy adventurers crowding the floor. Sir stepped forward from near the entrance. She didn't beam. She didn't tease. She didn't announce them. Her smile was thin, practiced. "Table for two?" she asked coolly. Belle blinked, thrown off. "Ah. We'll sit at the bar," Peter said easily. Sir paused for half a second, then gave a small hum. She stepped aside without another word, already turning away, leaving them to find their own seats. Belle glanced after her, puzzled. She seems different." Peter didn't answer right away. He'd noticed it too. They took 2 stools at the bar. Mia Grand looked up as they settled in. She stared at Peter for a long moment, then barked out a short laugh. "Huh, didn't think I'd see you alive after last time." Peter smiled faintly. "Evening to you too. I heard about it," Mia continued, folding her arms. "You beat Tiona." Belle stiffened. Mia shook her head slowly, impressed. "That's not something people just do, kid. Most would call it impossible." Peter shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Guess I got lucky." Mia snorted. Luck doesn't put a Loki Familia monster on her back. She reached for a mug and began filling it. The moment passed, naturally, as if they both agreed not to linger on it. Peter rested his elbows on the counter, relaxing. The bar, the rhythm of Mia's movements, the unspoken understanding, it all felt familiar. She reminded him of Dr. Banner in his Hulk form, after the blip. A gentle giant with unimaginable strength. Someone who didn't need to prove anything, because everyone in the room already knew what they were capable of. Belle glanced around. Why is it so empty tonight?" Mia raised an eyebrow. "Ganesha." Peter tilted his head, waiting for her to elaborate. "His adventurers throw an afterparty once the gods' banquet ends," she explained. "Food, booze, music. He's generous enough that there are leftovers to feed half the city." She jerked her thumb vaguely toward the window. "Most of Orario's out there enjoying themselves." Belle nodded slowly. "Oh." Sir came over to take their order, her expression polite but distant, none of the usual sparkle in her eyes. Belle glanced at Peter, then straightened a little. "Since the goddess is treating us today," he said, a small grin forming, "I want to try this too." He pointed at a dish he'd eyed last time, then added another. "And this?" Peter raised a brow. "Going all out, huh?" Belle chuckled. "Just a little." Sir hummed noncommittally, scribbled down their order, and walked away without another word. They settled into easy conversation after that. Mia worked behind the bar, occasionally tossing in a comment or two, the atmosphere quiet but comfortable. Horn turned away from the bar with the order slip clenched between her fingers, the gentle smile slipping the moment she was out of sight. A waitress. Her steps carried her toward the kitchen, practiced and automatic, but irritation simmered beneath every movement. She was an adventurer, Freya Familia. Steel, blood, battle. She had earned her place with strength, not with carrying plates. Now it was constant. Freya was locked away in the penthouse, eyes glued to the magic mirror, watching Belle Crenell and Peter Parker almost every moment, leaving Horn stuck here instead. Tonight, however, Freya was away at the banquet of gods. Horn tapped her fingers on the counter, sighing as she waited for the kitchen to finish preparing the order. "All this time, standing around, serving plates, I used to be out there, actually doing something." The monotony gnawed at her. When the plates were ready, she lifted them, the warmth seeping into her palms, and carried them to the bar. Right there, in front of her, were the source of all her frustrations, Belle looking eager, smiling, blissfully unaware. Peter leaning forward, talking with Mia, completely relaxed. Something sharp twisted in her chest. She hadn't planned it, there was no strategy, just a sudden, impulsive thought as she stepped closer. What if I just... Her foot shifted. The tray tipped. For a heartbeat, satisfaction flared. Then Peter moved. Too fast, too clean. He slipped aside as if he'd sensed it coming, untouched. Her breath caught. Damn it, the food kept falling. Belle took the full brunt of it. Sauce, stew, bread, everything hit him at once. He sat there blinking, stunned, covered from head to toe. The tavern went silent. Then it came, that crushing presence. Mia. Horn froze. Her stomach lurched. She had seen Mia in action before, ripping apart monsters with her bare hands, cutting through chaos like it was nothing. Her bark, her glare, the way she could make grown adventurers jump without raising a hand, Mia's temper was legendary, and Horn had lived under it. SYR. The shout cracked through the room like thunder. Every waitress nearby instantly found somewhere else to be. That comes out of your pay, Mia bellowed. And you're taking that young man to get cleaned up. Now. Horn bowed immediately. Yes. Then you come back and clean this entire mess. Her jaw clenched. More cleaning. She straightened, her gaze flicking briefly toward Peter, already steady, already checking on Belle, completely unharmed. Even when she lashed out, he slipped away. Horn turned back to Belle, forcing Sir's gentle mask into place, already regretting the impulse, and dreading the quiet reckoning waiting for her later, when Freya returned and inevitably heard about this. Belle wiped sauce off his cheek, trying to laugh it off. Guess I should have stuck to soup. Mia snorted, grabbing a cloth and already wiping the counter with aggressive efficiency. Kid, at this point Soup would have fought back. As Sir guided Belle away, Peter watched her retreating figure, eyes narrowed, thoughtful. Mia scrubbed once more, then jerked her chin to the side. Sit here instead. She gestured to a clean stretch of bar. Casual, practical, like the explosion hadn't just happened. Peter slid over, resting his elbows on the counter. After a moment, he spoke lightly. Sir's acting differently today. Mia wiped the counter, the cloth moving a little slower than before. Her jaw tightened, just a fraction. Peaceful, that was all she'd wanted. A peaceful retired life. She'd fought, she'd bled, she'd buried enough memories to last 3 lifetimes. The hostess was supposed to be simple: food, drinks, loud adventurers, broken hearts she didn't have to fix anymore. Then her damn goddess decided that being the richest and the most powerful goddess in Orario was boring. So she comes down, puts on an apron, plays waitress like it's some cute little game. And as if that wasn't enough, she sends her jealous little bitch too. Same face, same voice, different moods, different brand of trouble. One day warm smiles, the next ice-cold stares, both pretending to be the same damned girl while Mia was expected to just roll with it. 2 people, 1 face, 0 consideration for the old woman running the place. It drove her insane. She was getting too old for this shit. Aloud, Mia only sighed. Everyone's got bad days, she said, voice rough but even. She kept wiping the counter, slow, methodical strokes, the kind that came from years of habit rather than need. The tavern had settled again, the moment passed. Then, without looking up, Mia spoke. You know, she said, you and Tiona are a lot alike. Peter blinked. Really? Tiona hides her grief behind smiles, Mia continued, eyes still on the wood. Keeps things loud, keeps things light, makes sure everyone's laughing so no one stops to ask how she's really doing. Peter's expression shifted, something tight passing behind his eyes. And you, Mia added, finally looking at him, hide your pain behind jokes. Different mask, same reason. Peter exhaled, shoulders loosening despite himself. Is it that obvious? Mia shook her head, not to most. She leaned her weight against the bar, voice lowering. I've seen a lot of broken people pass through this place. Some drown themselves in drink. Some shut everyone out. Some get angry at the world. A pause. Some try to get themselves killed in the dungeon. Her gaze sharpened, steady and unflinching. In my book, you and Tiona are the better kind. The better kind, Peter echoed quietly. You hurt, Mia said simply. And instead of spreading it, you spread laughter. Joy. She snorted softly. That takes more strength than most folks ever manage. Peter swallowed. Is Tiona hurting? Mia nodded once. She's had it rough. She's better now. Another pause. But that's her story to tell, not mine. Silence stretched between them. Then Mia noticed it, the way Peter's posture had slouched, just a little. The way his hand tightened on the edge of the counter. The faint shine in his eyes. Without a word, she poured him a mead and slid it across. You can share some of your burden with me, she said gruffly. I'm a professional bartender. Comes with the job. Peter huffed out a weak breath, staring into the mug. Medieval shrink, he mused faintly. Still, he appreciated it. More than he wanted to admit. And honestly, he was grateful he could drink legally here, assuming Orario even had a legal drinking age. He glanced toward the floor, where Sir was still scrubbing in silence, then leaned closer to Mia. I lost everything a few days ago, he said softly. My aunt, she raised me. She died because of my mistakes. His voice wavered, just for a second. After that, I had to leave. My friends, my girlfriend, my home, all of it. Mia stopped scrubbing. She turned fully toward him, eyes sharp but deeply kind. Peter swallowed and kept going. The worst part, his fingers curled around the mug. I feel like I'm replacing them. My aunt with goddess Hestia. My girlfriend with Tiona. My best friend, someone who was like a brother to me, with Belle. For a long moment, Mia said nothing. Then she spoke, slow and certain. You don't replace the people you love, she said. They always keep their place. No one takes that from them. She tapped the counter once, firmly. But if others help fill some of the space they left behind. A shrug, all the better. Her voice softened. Your aunt, your friends, they wouldn't want you hollowed out and alone. They'd want you living, laughing, finding warmth where you can. Mia met his eyes. That doesn't mean you've forgotten them. It means you're still alive. Peter stared at his drink, breathing unevenly. Belle returned a short while later. Peter's mood flipped instantly, like a switch had been thrown. Well, Peter grinned, leaning back. How much did Sir help you clean up? Be honest, did you make her give you a full bath? Belle froze. Then his face went red in stages. And no, I mean, it was just water and towels. Mia snorted. Peter laughed. Wow, straight to details. Suspicious. Mia shot Peter a look, sharp, knowing, and just a little sad. It lasted only a heartbeat. Then she turned that glare on Belle, arms crossing. You better not be doing anything untoward with my girls. Belle yelped. I wasn't, I swear, nothing happened. Mia leaned closer, looming. Because if it did, I'm innocent. She studied him for a second longer, then clicked her tongue. Too easy, Mia thought. Too damn pure for this place. Still, she didn't let up. Intimidating him was far too entertaining. An elf waitress arrived just then with their replacement order, carefully setting the plates down. Belle looked visibly relieved by the distraction. They ate, the tension easing into comfortable noise, clinking plates, casual chatter, Peter throwing in the occasional joke, Belle relaxing little by little. Mia listened, gruff and steady behind the bar, watching them with an expression that said she'd seen how fragile moments like this were. And how important it was to let them stay light, just a bit longer. Hephaestus watched the scene with open amusement as Hestia knelt on the floor before her. What are you doing? Hephaestus asked. Dageza, Hestia replied proudly, forehead pressed to the ground. Takemikazuki taught it to me. You do it when you want to ask for something. Hephaestus sighed, rubbing her temple. Didn't you promise you wouldn't beg me anymore? Hestia lifted her head slightly. This is different. Hephaestus eyed her warily. And what exactly are you begging me for? Hestia straightened, hands clasped. Weapons. For my precious children. Hephaestus pinched the bridge of her nose. And what kind of weapons would those be? Hestia froze. Thought. Then nodded seriously. I'm not sure. Hephaestus stared. Belle used to use a knife, but now he uses a sword, Hestia continued helpfully. And Peter uses short swords, but he mentioned something called a sai. Hephaestus let out a long, tired sigh. That is exactly what I'd expect from new adventurers. She crossed her arms. If I give them high-level weapons now, I'd only stunt their growth. Instead, send them to the 8th floor of Babel. My lower-level children sell there. Hestia blinked. Hestia shot up from the floor instantly. Already did. Hephaestus paused. What? They're literally doing that right now, Hestia said, hands on her hips, chest puffed out proudly. Cheap weapons. Experimenting. Growing naturally. Just like you said. Hephaestus stared at her. Then why are you kneeling? Hestia froze. Because I panicked. Hephaestus closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. Of course you did. Hestia immediately dropped back into Dageza. In my defense, they're growing very fast. There was a beat. Then Hephaestus spoke again, her voice dry as forge ash. And that, she said flatly, is precisely what you should be worrying about right now, rather than trying to buy weapons you absolutely cannot afford. Hestia tilted her head. Huh. Hephaestus opened one eye. What exactly do you mean by your children are growing up so fast? Hestia stiffened. She hadn't meant to say that. I just meant Peter is very strong, Hestia mumbled, suddenly fascinated by the floor. Hephaestus's gaze sharpened. You said children. Hestia looked like she'd been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. You're hiding something, Hephaestus continued calmly. And you should be hiding these things. Your child Peter has already attracted far too much attention. She leaned forward slightly. How is he that strong? Hestia shrank a little. He already has 2 skills. And a magic. Hephaestus blinked once, then frowned. Exceptional for a new adventurer, she admitted. But still not enough to explain defeating a level 5. Her tone hardened. Which means you need to hide your children's abilities. Immediately. Hestia looked up. Hide, do you know how to lock Falna? Hephaestus asked. Hestia shook her head. Hephaestus rang a small bell on her desk. A moment later, one of her lower-level children stepped into the office. Without ceremony, Hephaestus guided the mildly confused adventurer toward a couch. Take off your shirt, she said, then added, and lay down. The adventurer obeyed, still unsure what was happening. Hephaestus turned to Hestia. Watch carefully, she said, already moving to demonstrate the process. Hestia returned late that night. Peter and Belle were still up, sitting near the table and talking quietly when the door opened. Peter glanced over. How was the banquet? Hestia slipped off her sandals and stretched. Pretty good, actually. Food was great. Then her face twisted. Until Loki, no boobs, showed up and ruined my mood. Belle winced sympathetically. But, Hestia brightened just as fast. Demeter invited me over afterward. I'll be spending tomorrow there, baths, good food, and actually getting to relax for once. She sighed happily at the thought. Peter smiled. Sounds deserved. Hestia clapped her hands lightly. All right. Status updates, then sleep. I'm exhausted. Belle and Peter exchanged a glance and moved without complaint. This part had become familiar. Belle lay down first. Hestia hopped up lightly, sitting on his lower back, and pressed her palm between his shoulders. The familiar glow spread beneath her touch, warm, steady, controlled. After a moment, she reached for a blank status sheet and tapped it against his back. The information transferred cleanly. Falna flowed into the paper in neat, glowing lines, precise and orderly. Hestia folded the sheet, deliberately skipping over the skill section, then placed her hand back on Belle's back. The glow faded. When Belle sat up, his skin was blank. No Falna. Peter blinked. That's new. Hestia puffed out her chest, hands on her hips. Hephaestus taught me. Locked and hidden. No one else can see your status unless I allow it. Belle's eyes widened. Really? She nodded, already handing him the sheet. Belle Crenell, LV, 1, Strength, G248, F335. Endurance, G232, F320. Dexterity, G257, F342. Agility, F368, E460. Mind, I0. Magic, opening square bracket closing square bracket. Skills, opening square bracket closing square bracket. Belle watched wide-eyed at his amazing growth, still somewhat surprised. That's more than 300 points. Hestia didn't comment, she simply turned toward Peter. Your turn. They switched places. Peter lay down, folding his hands beneath his chin. Hestia repeated the process. Touch, glow, sheet. The Falna transferred smoothly, without resistance, without drama. She locked his Falna as well, just as easily. All done, Hestia said, hopping off and stretching as she handed him the paper. Peter Parker, LV, 1, Strength, I11, I17. Endurance, I2. Dexterity, I11, I18. Agility, I14, I21. Mind, I40, I62. Magic, Arachnostrand. No chant magic. Shoot webs from hands. Skills, Spider powers. Abilities akin to a spider's natural capabilities. Spider sense. Can sense danger. Belle took the sheet from Peter after he finished looking it over, then compared it with his own, eyes moving back and forth between the numbers. His brow furrowed as he quietly tried to make sense of the discrepancy. Why am I growing so fast? He muttered. Neither Hestia nor Peter paid him any attention. Peter reached into his bag and handed a form to Hestia. This needs your signature. Hestia accepted it, tilting her head as she scanned the page. What is it? The Familia Captain registration form, Peter replied. He had already filled it out, his own name written clearly in the captain's slot. Hestia read through it once, then paused. There's also a space here for a vice captain. She looked up. I want to register Belle as vice captain. Belle, finally pulled out of his thoughts, blinked. Me, vice captain. I don't know if I'm ready for that, he added, shifting nervously. Maybe we should wait until the Familia is bigger. Peter frowned. Belle was still far too immature to be given a position of authority. We can handle that later, once we have more members, he said carefully. Hestia folded her arms and gave him a sharp look. Belle was my first child. By my authority as the Familia's goddess, he will be vice-captain. Belle's protest died in his throat. Peter sighed. There wasn't much he could do about it. And honestly, it wasn't as if it would cause problems. Belle almost always deferred to his decisions anyway. Hestia finished filling out the form and signed it, then slid it back across the table. Peter took it and handed it to Belle. I'm going to the Under Resort with Tiona tomorrow. I'll head out early. Can you submit this to the guild? Belle nodded. Yeah, sure, thanks. That's settled. Hestia yawned and stretched, muttering something about baths and good food tomorrow. Peter laid down on his couch, staring at the ceiling and wondering how his second date with Tiona tomorrow would go. And this is the end of part 10 of this amazing crossover, What If? Do not forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.